Hello, police headquarters? This is Carter, Johnny Carter.
Oh, sure, they're from another planet.
What a dilemma for young lovers Steve Terrell and Gloria Castillo.
He thought I was kidding him.
Nobody will believe the invasion of the Saucermen. All this makes it seem natural for a beer-drinking bull to appoint himself chaperone of Lover's Lane.
Hey, for Pete's sake!
And a farmer with the longest shotgun you've ever seen plays the villain.
What's so funny?
Well, I expected to be frightened on my wedding night, but nothing like this.
It's our busy night, too. We've been flooded with calls from people who say they've seen flying saucers and little green monsters. Wonder how that rumor ever got started.
It's too fantastic to believe.
Just think of it. Only this special unit and the President of the United States will know what happened here tonight.
You mean you think we know what's happened?
We're not talking about actors. We mean a real monster.
I brought her back. She'll live and I'll get her another body.
I know they're going to catch me, but don't let anyone see me like that. Please, Doctor, help me!
Biologically speaking, it's of primary importance that man should want to mate. Hey, that's...
You don't get all your kicks from surfing, do you?
We want to be free to ride our machines without being hassled by the man. And we want to get loaded.
You think you're gonna make a slave of the world? I'll see you in hell first!
The American International Podcast.
Are you ready?
What's that up in the sky? It's the American International Podcast. I'm Cheryl Lightfoot.
And I'm Jeff Markin.
And today we're talking about Invasion of the Saucermen from 1957.
Invasion of the Saucermen was directed by Edward L. Cahn, written by Robert J. Gurney Jr. and L. Martin, based on the short story The Cosmic Frame by Paul W. Fairman, and it was produced by James H. Nicholson.
Invasion of the Saucermen stars Steve Terrell as Johnny Carter, Gloria Castillo as Joan Hayden, Frank Gorshin as Joe Gruen, Raymond Hatton as Farmer Larkin, Lyn Osbornas as Art Burns, Russ Bender as Doctor, Douglas Henderson as Lieutenant Wilkins, Sam Buffington as Colonel Ambrose, Jason Johnson as a detective.
Also appearing are Don Shelton as City Attorney Hayden, Kelly Thordsen as Sergeant Bruce, and as various aliens we have Angelo Rossito, Eddie Gibbons, Dean Neville, and Lloyd Dixon, and also appearing are Paul Blaisdell and Bob Burns.
Invasion of the Saucermen opens with a storybook. This is the true story of the flying saucer. We see a hand turning the pages of the book, and that reveals the credits along with some cute little illustrations of flying saucers.
In these illustrations, we see a flying saucer chasing a woman, and the occupant of the flying saucer has a lasso in his hand. I thought that was amusing.
It's even more amusing when you consider that it's not pertinent to the story at all.
Another page, they have some army dudes shooting up and breaking up the flying saucer, and it goes on like that.
When you say shooting up, you mean shooting up the saucer, not shooting up heroin, right?
Yeah, he shoots the saucer and it kind of disintegrates.
Well, there is a little bit of that in the story, but we'll get there. The movie proper opens on a dark and stormy night, where the narrator is telling the story of what happened this night.
The narrator introduces the farmer's house. This is Farmer Larkin's house, and says that we are in the town of Hicksburg, which he assures us is the town's real name, and that there's just not much for the kids to do around here.
Well, there's one thing for them to do, and that's to make out. But first, the narrator is named Art Burns, and he and his partner, Joe Gruen, are occupying stools in a diner and striking out with the waitress. They argue about whether they should stay in town and try their scams or go somewhere else with more potential. After one last hit and miss on the waitress, the two leave the diner, and then they split up. Joe takes the car, and Art says that he's going to walk back to the boarding house where they're staying.
So after they've parted ways, we follow Joe, and it's not too long before he sees a flying saucer.
Yeah, he wanted to find some action, and instead he found a UFO. He sees it land in a nearby field and pulls over to investigate, and then we cut to a new scene with three teens who are seeing the same thing that Joe did, but from further away, obviously.
This is Bobby, Duke, and Johnny, and they see it too. The soda jerk comes out from the soda shop to see what the guys are gawking at. He teases them about seeing flying saucers of all different colors. This one was blue.
Also in the soda shop is an Army recruitment officer, or so he says. He comes out of the shop as well and sees what everyone else is seeing. He doesn't say anything, but we can plainly see that he knows something. Johnny's talking to his friends and says that he's waiting for his girl, Joan. They have an assignation that night at 9:30. The soda jerk makes a crack about Joan having all the right parts in the right places for her dress, and Johnny says, yeah, and they're all mine. Haha. Then Joan pulls up in her car, and she and Johnny leave.
They're heading out to where all the kids in town head out in the evening. They're going to Lover's Point. Lover's Point used to be a private public spot, but the land has since been acquired by Farmer Larkin, whose farmhouse the narrator introduced us to earlier. Farmer Larkin pops out of his house as Johnny and Joan drive by. He doesn't like kids trespassing on his property.
Well, unfortunately for him, at this point in time, there are several cars and they're all full of smoochers.
Johnny says that he hopes he doesn't run into Larkin's bull on the way up. Apparently, this bull is a known problem amongst these kids.
Meanwhile, we're back with Joe, and he sees something. It lights up his face. We don't see what it is, but it causes him some concern, and he gets in his car and drives away.
So now we're cutting back to the kids, and the aforementioned bull comes up to one of the cars, and he scares the couple making out. Bobby, the male part of this couple, explains that Larkin's bull is always looking for a handout, and he throws a beer can out for him.
This bull seems to be something of an alcoholic.
Yeah, it's a running gag that they give beer to this bull, and Farmer Larkin is not too thrilled with this.
Well, nobody wants your cow getting drunk. In Johnny and Joan's car, they take a break from smooching to talk about their plans. They're going to elope that night. And then we cut to the boarding house, where Joe returns to wake up Artie, who's asleep. Joe is very excited. He thinks what he saw means that they are going to be millionaires. They're going to be the first to exhibit a genuine flying saucer.
Joe explains that he saw it land on the Larkin property. Joe and Artie have only been in town for about a month, but that's long enough that everybody knows about Farmer Larkin. Artie doesn't believe Joe's story, and Joe's like, fine, who needs ya? And he leaves.
And Artie goes back to sleep. Back with Joan and Johnny, Johnny shows Joan her wedding ring. And then we cut to a scene with some military people. Lieutenant Wilkins, who was the officer in the soda shop earlier, talks to his commanding officer, Colonel Ambrose, or Ambrose, as he says. The Army has been tracking this UFO, so this is not an unexpected development for them. Colonel Ambrose cautions Lieutenant Wilkins to keep a lid on this information. He used to be a public information officer, but he needs to keep this away from all his news contacts.
So now that Johnny and Joan are officially engaged, their elopement is in progress. They're going to head back to town, so they're driving with their lights off, so as not to disturb the other kids and hopefully not to be seen by Farmer Larkin. Because they're driving dark, they nearly collide with a car full of soldiers on their way to the flying saucer. Johnny was blinded by their lights, and they didn't see Johnny because he was driving without lights.
Having missed that collision, they actually do collide with something. It's a little creature with a big head, which they see when they get out of the car and investigate. At first they're afraid they hit a little boy, but then some lightning flashes and they see that it's not of this world. Johnny and Joan get back in their car. They want to get out of there. But they can't leave. They've still got that alien stuck under the bumper. As they try to maneuver out of there, the alien's hand separates from its body. The fingers allow it to crawl over to where the tire is. And out of its fingers protrude some needle-like appendages, which puncture the tire. Now they're truly stuck there, and the hand scuttles away.
Johnny and Joan hear the sound of the tire deflating and go to investigate. Then Johnny incorrectly deduces that the tire must have deflated when he hit that thing. At any rate, he doesn't have a spare, so they'll have to go to Farmer Larkin's place to use the phone.
Now we're back with the Army men. They have set up a perimeter around the flying saucer. They're keeping tabs on the ship where currently nothing is happening.
Wilkins asked Ambrose if he thinks this craft could be from another planet. Ambrose tells him that this isn't the time to think, it's time to follow procedure. An SOP calls for this to be called in.
Ambrose says that protocol calls for them getting Army engineers out there. They'll take over the investigation. Then his commanding officer calls and Ambrose fills him in on everything that's going on right now.
Meanwhile, Johnny and Joan have made it to Farmer Larkin's house. He isn't home, so they make themselves at home, walk right in, and use the phone to call the police. The policeman who answers takes the call, but he's not very helpful. He tells them that if they see any more little green men, to give them his love and send them on home.
It's really no surprise that the police didn't take them seriously, though. Joan goes rummaging in the kitchen to find some candles. Now we're back with Joe. He returns to where the dead alien is under Joan and Johnny's car. He touches the creature and gets kind of grossed out. It's pretty sticky. He finds that even though he wants to, he can't shift it. It's stuck there.
Back at the Larkin farm, Farmer Larkin returns, entering his home with shotgun raised. He's not happy to see 2 kids in his house. Johnny and Joan try to explain what has happened, but Larkin is convinced that they've killed one of his heifers. It was bound to happen with the kids driving all over his property.
He tries to call the police, but as Johnny predicted, the phone is dead. Farmer Larkin asks Joan and Johnny if they've been drinking. He sniffs the air and he smells alcohol. They deny having drunk anything, but do admit that they smell it too.
Farmer Larkin sends Johnny and Joan out into the night, and now they've no other choice but to try to fix the flat.
Larkin tries the phone again, and he does get a call through this time. He asks Sadie, the operator, to send the cops over. Somebody broke into his house. Probably killed his heifers.
So Larkin asks her to send the police while he goes out to check on his livestock.
We're back with Joe, where he's still trying to get that alien out from under the car, and he can't. Another alien watches him try, though. And then he runs off. Just as Joan and Johnny return to the car. And they hear a strange noise. So do we, I guess.
We cut to a quick scene where we see that Larkin has found his bull and he's sweet-talking it. Oh, woojoo, 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 woojoo.
If you say so, Jeff. Joe Gruen finds his way to Larkin's farmhouse. It's probably the only building for miles. He goes to the phone and makes a call to Artie. Artie answers, and Joe tells him that he's been telling the truth and he's got proof. He tells Artie to get in a cab and come over so he can see it for himself, but Artie's not interested. Joe changes tactics and instead tells Artie to clean everything out of the refrigerator. He's going to bring home something perishable. If he can get it out from under that car, then he takes off.
Joe runs out of the house just as Larkin returns. Every time Larkin comes home, there's somebody new in his house.
He needs a phone booth is what he needs. Artie realizes that it's better off not to fight it, so he gets up and begrudgingly empties out the refrigerator. Joe goes back to the alien, but again, grabbing it only gets him a handful of goo. So he wanders into the woods and has a slug from his flask. Then an alien sneaks up behind him and sucker punctures him with his needle fingers that are dripping with some kind of substance.
This is around the same time that Artie decides that emptying the refrigerator is a fool's errand, so he goes back to bed, this time with earplugs. And then we see a whole group of these saucer men. They're dragging off the body of their fallen comrade. And one starts pounding on the fender of Johnny's car. Johnny and Joan hear the noise and are surprised to see another one of those creatures, this time a living one.
And they conclude that this creature is taking revenge on the car that killed their friend.
They hear sirens, and they figure the police must have believed Johnny after all, so they run towards the sound since they now have evidence to present.
Or do they? Back at the ship, Ambrose is trying to make first contact, but he's having no luck.
Colonel Ambrose supposes there was never anyone inside, and it must be remote controlled. Then Lieutenant Wilkins suggests they fire a few rounds just to see if they can get a reaction.
When Johnny and Joan return to their car, the police are there. They've just taken a body away from the accident site. Not that they saw that.
Johnny and Joan tell the detective their story, and this almost fits with what they know.
And it's pretty obvious from the conversation that the cops and Johnny and Joan are definitely not on the same page. Joan is confessing to hitting something small and alien, but the cop knows that a man died out there. This cop is incredulous when they start talking about little green men, and they decide to give Johnny a breathalyzer test. While Johnny's taking the breathalyzer test, the cop and the coroner discuss how kids these days are so desensitized to violence. And the reason is because of all that killing they see in the movies. Take that, American International Pictures. And then both note that they can smell alcohol on them. Both of them, including Joan. And she's a girl.
The detective tells Johnny and Joan that driving without lights and hitting a man, killing him, is a crime. Joan says that they can't be calling that little green monster a man, but nevertheless, they all head downtown.
Johnny and Joan, now at the police station, are still trying to explain what they think happened. The detective is trying to get Johnny to sign a confession. He did kill a man after all. But Johnny and Joan adamantly insist that they killed no man. Joan plays the "do you know who my father is" card, and the detective calls her bluff. They already called her dad. He's the city attorney. And he's coming in. As a matter of fact, he's here now.
Joan runs to him, and he says that he thought that she was going out with Tommy, not with this roughneck in his suit and tie. And just then an officer comes in and says that the body is ready for identification, so the detective leads everyone to the morgue. Johnny is sure that when everybody sees this thing, then everyone will believe his story. A gurney is brought out and the sheet removed to reveal The chameleon.
No, it's Joe Gruen. Or is it the Riddler? It's Frank Gorshin. Joan is stunned to see a person on that gurney. She claims they did not hit him.
And Johnny insists he didn't kill this man. He killed a little green monster. According to the dead man's identification, his name was Joe Gruen. We already knew that. And he and a buddy had drifted into town about a month ago and are renting a place on Maple Street. They tried calling the friend, but have so far not been able to get in touch with him. That's a lot of identification he was carrying.
Joan's dad thinks that she didn't do anything wrong, but he has his doubts about Johnny. Her father wants her to come home, but Joan refuses, unless Johnny goes with her.
Now we're back with Colonel Ambrose and Lieutenant Wilkins and company, and they're trying to tear open the saucer with blowtorches. They must have hit something vital because the saucer explodes, which is momentarily distracting to all the kids who are making out nearby.
And that explosion is even seen at the police station.
For whatever reason, Johnny and Joan have been left alone in a room. And Johnny is thinking about his situation, and he realizes that the little green monsters are smarter than all of them put together. Johnny and Joan had thought that they were mad at the car for killing their companion, but now it seems that they were denting the fender to frame them for the death of Joe Gruen.
That is smart.
So Johnny realizes he's got to get out of this police station and find some evidence to clear his name. So they leave out the window. They find the detective's car conveniently sitting outside with the light flashing, so they jump inside and take off in it. Just then, the detective and city attorney Hayden return to the room and find that Johnny and Joan have gone. Hayden, out of concern for his daughter's reputation, asks that this not go on record and says that he will assume all responsibility. Just then, another officer comes in and is surprised to see that the detective is here because his car just left.
Johnny and Joan drive to where Johnny's car is stuck. They get out of the detective car and go investigate. While they're looking elsewhere, the severed hand takes the opportunity to crawl into the detective's car.
So Johnny and Joan realize that the body they hit is gone. There's no evidence to be found here. So they need to come up with another plan. So they're going to hop back into the detective's car they borrowed and go back up to Lover's Point to see if any of the other kids have seen anything.
Joan wonders if any of the gang saw the alien, and Johnny wonders if cops will ever listen to teenagers. Probably not. Meanwhile, the hand in the back seat has crawled up to the top of the front seat and is starting to reach for Joan's bare shoulders.
Joan, thinking about what the night has brought her, says that she expected to be frightened on her wedding night, but nothing like this.
As Johnny turns to go to the point, the hand gets thrown off the top of the front seat, back onto the floor of the back seat. The hand scuttles up the back seat again, and this time Joan sees it. She screams, and Johnny pulls over. They escape the vehicle, shutting the doors and trapping the hand inside. They realize that they do have some evidence now, but they have no way to get it to the police. They need an ally, an adult ally. After they think about it for a minute, they realize Joe's roommate should help them. Joan and Johnny know that the cops have been trying to reach his roommate all night. And they mentioned his address when they were in the station. So they're going to go to his place.
Despite his earplugs, Artie isn't getting much sleep tonight. First, Joe kept waking him up with weird stories, and now these two kids are talking about little green men.
Although Artie is skeptical about the little green men story, he does agree to phone the police. When he calls, the police confirm that they were trying to call him because Joe was killed by a hit-and-run driver. They ask Artie to come claim the body the next day, and he agrees. After he hangs up, he tells Johnny and Joan that he intends to get a picture of this alien, and he grabs his camera. Then he cracks a joke about Joe being the first victim of an alien on Earth. And Joan winces a little bit. Artie also grabs a gun and tells a story about how he took it off a Nazi, and then has to confess that it was a dead Nazi.
Back out at the Larkin farm, Larkin's bull is wandering around again. One of the saucer men is watching from behind a bush, and then suddenly they do battle.
It's mano a hoofo. There's a bit of wrestling. The alien digs its poison needle claws into the bull's hide. The bull gives as good as he gets, though, goring the alien's bulbous eyeballs with its horns. It has some opposable horns, apparently. They twist and turn as needed. In the end, though, the heifer succumbs to its injuries and falls to the ground.
Johnny, Joan, and Artie head out to the car to drive back out to where they left the detective's car. Artie mentions that he thought that Johnny had said the police had his car, and they do. He explains that this car belongs to Joan. He turns the ignition, but the car doesn't start right away. The battery is almost dead. Joan is asked when is the last time she's checked the water. Every time the man at the gas station asks her, she says, "Not the radiator water, the battery water." "What's that?" she asks, and I would ask that as well.
Actually, we both did ask that. We didn't know you had to water your battery. Artie commands Johnny and Joan to get out and push the car. as Artie steers. I guess he's going to pop the clutch and get it to start. As he does, Artie notices that Joan has a spotlight over where her side mirror is. Then the car starts and it shimmies, and we learn that the car is called Elvis. It bends and shakes, but man, does it really go. And then the three drive off.
Next, we see that the Army personnel are cleaning up after the explosion. They've called in a crashed fighter plane, so that's going to be the official story.
Now we're back at the car with the alien hand trapped inside. Another alien is trying to jimmy the locks. Artie, Joan, and Johnny pull up, and the alien runs away. They look inside the car, but they don't see that hand. So Johnny puts Joan's spotlight on it. The hand is visible, and Johnny takes a picture with his flashbulb, and the hand sort of immolates. They're surprised, but agree to go tell the cops. I mean, now they have an adult witness. However, their vehicle will not start at all.
As Johnny continues to try to turn the ignition, saucer men start to emerge from the woods.
Yeah, they had to kill the headlights, and now it's full darkness.
Artie starts shooting at them with his Nazi gun. And with nothing else to do, Jones shines the spotlight at them. The light seems to hurt them, so Artie gets out of the car to man the spotlight himself. But it's growing dimmer and dimmer. It doesn't take long before it's so dim that it's not doing them any good. So Artie decides he's going to make a run for it. He doesn't make it too far, though. He gets accosted by one of the saucer men and injected with alcohol.
Johnny grabs Artie's camera and tries shooting off the flash bulbs. It doesn't help Artie, but it gives them time to run away.
By now, Colonel Ambrose and Lieutenant Wilkins have finished cleaning things up. Ambrose is proud of the work they've done tonight, and how cool is it that they get to do this top secret detail. Only the president and this team will ever know what went on out here tonight.
Lieutenant Wilkins wonders if they even know what really happened that night. Ambrose seems perturbed by this observation. Elsewhere, Joan is tired of running and suggests that they turn themselves in and get the police out there to help.
So they decide to head back to Larkin's farm to use the phone once again.
They try to turn themselves into the police, but the police don't want them. They've gotten the results of the autopsy, and it suggests that Joe died of acute alcoholism. They think Johnny and Joan ran over his already dead body. They don't even want them for the stolen car. Her dad took care of that.
So since they are once again unsuccessful in bringing adults to their side, Joan suggests they go back to Lover's Point. The other kids there will believe them, and they won't think that they're drunk.
Now we're with Farmer Larkin, where he checks on his prize heifer. Fortunately for the cow, it's just drunk, not dead.
But those darn kids got him again.
Johnny and Joan reach the cars with the smoochers inside, and they marshal up help with their plan to destroy the aliens.
Johnny has the kids arrange their cars in a circle, and Johnny will signal them with his horn, shaven a haircut style, to have them turn on their lights. It works because the creatures walk into the circle, Johnny gives the signal, and the creatures all disintegrate in the light.
Hearing that commotion, Artie wakes up. He too, like the cow, he was just drunk, not dead.
Johnny figures out that this is what happened to Joe Gruen too. Those creatures inject their victims with pure alcohol. Nobody pronounces alcohol the same way in this movie.
Or correctly. Artie is very drunk, and Johnny figures that he won't remember what happened. Only he and Joan and their friends will.
Just then, Farmer Larkin comes running over with his shotgun, and the kids get back into their cars and scatter. Johnny and Joan end up in the back seat of Paul and Irene. Johnny asks Paul if he'd be his best man, but Joan says that she can't get married like this, pointing to her dress, which is in shambles for being slammed in car doors and such. So Irene offers to switch dresses with her, which defaults her to maid of honor status.
Well, she was almost the bride, apparently. And then we see Artie. He's being driven off in the back seat of some jalopy, being nuzzled by two teenage girls who just met him. Okay. Anyhow, the voice of Artie returns to close out the film. That's his story, plus some stuff that Johnny and Joan helped him remember. And then we see the last page of the book that we saw at the beginning of the movie. It says the end, ... Until the next time. Welcome back to the American International Podcast, where we are talking about Invasion of the Saucermen from 1957.
Invasion of the Saucermen was made by Malibu Productions. Production of Saucermen began on April 8, 1957, and the live action was shot in 6 days at Ziv Studios in Hollywood. Video effects required 1 additional day, and those were shot at the Howard Anderson Studio.
Forrest J. Ackerman's Ackerman Science Fiction Agency owned the film rights to Fairman's short story, The Cosmic Frame. But the friendship between Ackerman and James H. Nicholson meant that AIP was assured the needed clearance for the film version, which went into production with the working title Spaceman Saturday Night.
In the Trailers from Hell video about Invasion of the Saucermen, Joe Dante said that the film was based on the Kelly-Hopkinsville alien encounter of 1955. On August 21st of that year, 5 adults and 7 children went into the Hopkinsville, Kentucky police station and claimed that small alien creatures were attacking their farmhouse and that they had been holding them off with gunfire for almost 2 hours. This report received widespread news coverage, with various news outlets embellishing the story, such as the detail that the creatures were little green men.
Special effects technician Paul Blaisdell, who provided 4 alien costumes, a mobile severed hand, and a flying saucer for the film, said in interviews that Invasion of the Saucermen was originally intended as a serious horror film, but was turned into a comedy, in part because of the aliens' appearance in the film.
Composer Ronald Stein was asked to write a humorous score for the film, now considered a sci-fi teenager-friendly rock and roll picture.
In the script and in all publicity materials, the aliens were depicted as being little and green, which served to help popularize the phrase little green men, the same phrase that was used to describe the alleged aliens in Kentucky. However, the masks and bodies were brown. Not that the audience could tell in this black and white movie.
Blaisdell and his friend/assistant Bob Burns played 2 of the aliens, with the others being played alternately by actors Angelo Rossito, Eddie Gibbons, Dean Neville, and Lloyd Dixon. The little people in the cast were dressed in full head-to-toe suits and masks, and were used primarily for full-figure and medium-to-close shots. In the extremely tight close-ups, the masks would be worn by either Bob or Paul.
The entire film takes place during the period of one night, with 98% of it filmed in a very large studio soundstage. Blaisdell felt that Frederick West's excellent day-for-night photography added a lot to the clarity of the film's picture quality. Blaisdell praised Ronald Stein's silly symphonic musical score and actor Lyn Osborn's rubbery, emotional facial expressions, with setting the perfect mood for the film. Lyn Osborn had previously starred as Cadet Happy on TV's Space Patrol in the mid-1950s. Unfortunately, though, he died soon after completing his work on Saucermen.
The AIP press book for Invasion of the Saucermen notes that Steve Terrell received great reviews from audience members and theater owners alike for his performance in Runaway Daughters, his first picture for American International Pictures. This positive response prompted AIP into signing Terrell to a 5-year contract.
Invasion of the Saucermen was released by AIP on June 19, 1957, as the second half of a double feature with I Was a Teenage Werewolf.
Box Office Magazine suggested theater owners outfit a street team in alien costumes, complete with enormous, hideous papier-mâché heads, to walk about town, carrying picture credit banners.
AIP's press book encouraged theater owners to park an ambulance in front of the theater, with a sign indicating the vehicle was to remove anyone who faints from terror. Also, owners should put one person on a stretcher, along with a sign indicating that the afflicted person couldn't handle the sheer terror of the 2 movies, saying these gags have been used for years, but they are surefire attention getters and have never failed.
The only time this film has been officially released on home video was in the 90s when it was released on VHS. As of this writing, there has been no official DVD or Blu-ray release, as Susan Hart owns the rights to this film and has chosen not to allow it to be released.
Taglines for Invasion of the Saucermen include creeping horror from the depths of time and space.
See the teenagers versus the Saucermen. See the disembodied hand that crawls. See the night the world nearly ended. See the Earth attacked by flying saucers.
They threatened the world until some hep youngsters took over.
The double bill of I Was a Teenage Werewolf and Invasion of the Saucermen grossed $2 million domestically, which at the time was a record for films of this kind.
Variety called the film a minor entry for the science fiction trade, noting that it suffers from poor use of attempted comedy and is further handicapped by a haphazard sort of yarn which makes the film's 69-minute running time seem much more.
Box Office Magazine wrote, because it required no small amount of courage to venture with a limited budget, a comedy that undertakes to spoof that staple of contemporary filmmaking, the space opera, this undertaking rates an A for effort. The teaming of the picture with I Was a Teenage Werewolf to form one of AIP's popular package bookings should, in itself, assure the film's success in its action exploitation market.
In 1965, self-professed schlockmeister Larry Buchanan cheaply remade Invasion of the Saucermen in color as Invasion of the Eye Creatures, a made-for-television feature for AIP TV.
The recurring alien character Morbo on Futurama was modeled on the aliens in the film.
And where have we seen some of these other players before and since this movie came out? Well, Steve Terrell, who played Johnny Carter, was in Runaway Daughters in 1956, and in 1957 appeared in Drag Strip Girl and Motorcycle Gang.
Gloria Castillo, who played Joan Hayden, had also appeared in Runaway Daughters and would go on to appear in Reform School Girl in 1957.
Frank Gorshin, who played Joe Gruen, was in Hot Rod Doll and Runaway Daughters in 1956, Drag Strip Girl, 1957, and would go on to appear in Tank Battalion in 1958, then take a AIP break before appearing in Record City in 1977 and Underground Aces, which was a Filmways release in 1981.
Raymond Hatton, who played Farmer Larkin and previously appeared in Day the World Ended in 1955, Girls in Prison and Shake, Rattle, and Rock in 1956, and would appear in Motorcycle Gang in 1957.
Lyn Osborne, who played Art Burns, would only appear in one other film, The Amazing Colossal Man in 1957. Russ Bender, however, appeared in a lot of AIP films. It Conquered the World in 1957, also that year Drag Strip Girl in The Amazing Colossal Man and Motorcycle Gang. In 1958, he appeared in Suicide Battalion, War of the Colossal Beast, and Hot Rod Gang. In 1959, he was in Ghost of Dragstrip Hollow. 1962, he was in Panic in Year Zero. 1965, Space Probe Taurus, The Devil's Angels in 1967, Mary Jane in 1968. Also in 1968, he had an uncredited role in Wild in the Streets and The Young Animals, which was also called Born Wild.
Douglas Henderson, who played Lieutenant Wilkins, and Jason Johnson, who was the detective, both appeared in Fireball 500 in 1966.
Don Shelton, who was City Attorney Hayden and Joan's dad, was in Drag Strip Girl in 1957 and High School Hellcats 1958.
And Scott Peters, the United States Air Force sergeant with Bullhorn, would also in 1957 appear in The Amazing Colossal Man and Motorcycle Gang. In 1958, we'd see him in Suicide Battalion, Attack of the Puppet People, Hot Rod Gang, and Submarine Seahawk. And in 1962, he would appear in Panic in Year Zero.
Jan England, the waitress at the diner, was in Reform School Girl and Suicide Battalion. Ed Nelson, who played Tom, appeared in Rock All Night in 1957. In 1958, he was in The Brain Eaters, Teenage Cavemen, Night of the Blood Beast, and he had uncredited roles in Hot Rod Gang and She Gods of Shark Reef. And he appeared in one last movie for AIP, A Bucket of Blood, in 1959.
Kimmy Pickford, who played Duke, appeared in Shake, Rattle, and Rock in 1956. And Buddy Mason, the policeman, had appeared in Runaway Daughters, uncredited in 1956, and would appear in a more prominent role in The Comedy of Terrors in 1963.
Angelo Rossito, who played an alien, was in The Trip in an uncredited role in 1967 and in Little Cigars in 1973.
And our director, Edward L. Cahn, directed several pictures for AIP, among many others. In 1956 alone, he helmed Girls in Prison, The She Creature, Flesh and the Spur, Runaway Daughters, Shake, Rattle, and Rock. In 1957, he was responsible for Voodoo Woman, Drag Strip Girl, Motorcycle Gang, and in 1958, he would bring us Jet Attack and Suicide Battalion.
All right, Jeff. That's all we could scare up on Invasion of the Saucermen. So why don't you tell us what you thought of the movie using our AIP scale where A is awesome, I is intermediate, and P is pathetic.
Well, it may not seem like it, but Invasion of the Saucermen is a very important film. Not so much in the way it approaches the subject matter, or the acting, or the writing, or the directing, but historically speaking, Invasion of the Saucermen is one of a handful of motion pictures from the early years of AIP that really represents the modus operandi of American International Pictures. It skews to the younger generation. The main characters are kids, and none of the adults believe anything they have to say. So the adults actually become the antagonists here, more so than the alcohol poisoning afflicting saucermen. And the idea of a generation just struggling to be heard would go on over the next few years, not only in films, but seeping into real life with the protests of the 60s. But as I was saying, this film is just classic AIP. It's really a shame that this is one of the titles controlled by Susan Hart Nicholson Hoffites, because the creatures here are iconic, but they've been largely hidden away because of her litigious tendencies. I can't venture to say what we may have missed out on, but I imagine there would have been action figures, models, Funko Pops, and there has been some attempts to do some of this merchandising, but I don't think any of them lasted very long before being shut down by lawsuits. Keeping these films locked away is not going to increase demand for them. Maybe there was a time when it would, but that time is long past. No one is nostalgic for these films anymore. For most that are still around, it would just be a curiosity because a lot has been written about films like Invasion of the Saucermen, It Conquered the World, I Was a Teenage Werewolf. And who knows if a release of the material would even be possible at this point. No one seems to know what condition the original elements might be in, if they exist at all. It's doubtful that Susan Hart has them stored away in a climate-controlled film vault. Maybe she just has them tucked away in a box under her bed, but I think she lives in Palm Springs, and that's not a good place for store film elements. I think the most likely scenario is that, while she holds the rights to the films, she doesn't have any physical elements at all, but I hope I'm wrong. This film really deserves to be seen, and it can be easily enough. It's available on YouTube and the Internet Archive, for now anyway, and they've all been uploaded from the Columbia TriStar VHS release from the early 90s. That were released before the films ended up in Susan's possession. But I would personally love to see a 4K restoration scan. Oklahoma Woman, and that's another of the Susan Hart titles, and we watched it twice from two different sources, and neither one was good.
Mm-mm.
And I think probably that's the best that anyone will ever see that film looking again. But I'm supposed to be reviewing Invasion of the Saucer Men, the film, and not the situation around it. But spoiler, the situation weighs heavily into my rating. I want to be sure to mention the score. We have Ronald Stein doing his thing once again. This one's really fun. He picked up on the comic tone over that horror, and it's whimsical, like a cartoon. It's not too over the top, but it's just enough to set the mood that we're not supposed to take this too seriously, even though a man has been killed and those alcohol-dripping needles extending from the creature's fingertips look really sharp. But no, we're supposed to just sit back and have a good time. Our two leads, Steve Terrell and Gloria Castillo, who we would recognize from Runaway Daughters if we had done that one, but we haven't done that one yet, so instead, when we do, we'll recognize them from Invasion of the Saucer Men. They may both be a little overdressed for a night of making out, but they do make the decision to get married that night, so maybe that wasn't as spontaneous as they led us to believe. The rest of the cast, we have Frank Gorshin, whose character unfortunately dies too soon, and Raymond Hatton as Farmer Larkin. I couldn't place where I'd seen him before, but it turns out he was Horace Fitzdingle, the tolerating husband to Margaret Dumont's character in Shake, Rattle, and Rock. This was a totally different character and fun to see in retrospect. And there are other familiar faces. Russ Bender, who's done a lot, and Don Shelton as City Attorney Hayden, and Joan's father, who I did recognize as playing basically the same character in Dragstrip Girl as Louise's, that was Faye Spain's father in that film. In my opinion, the most amusing characters of Invasion of the Saucer Men, though, are Colonel Ambrose and Lieutenant Wilkins. I think it was a brilliant move just to make the Army most of the comic relief in this film. So what we have is a quick, quirky film. Aside from the look of the Saucermen themselves, who really could benefit from more screen time, I don't really see that there's much memorable here. I don't know if it was intended or coincidental, but the story here would seem to serve as a blueprint for The Blob, which would come out a year later from an independent production company in the eastern U.S. It's another film where kids know what's going on and no adults will believe them. And it's dealing with something from outer space. So what it comes down to is that there's really a lot to be said about Invasion of the Saucer Men beyond just the film itself. And I do hope that we are able to see a re-release of the Saucer Men somehow during my lifetime, because it really needs an accompanying commentary track, or 3. I feel like I barely scratched the surface in regards to the importance of this film, but I will say that, in addition to its importance, it's also very entertaining, and I can offer no other rating besides an awesome A. What are your thoughts, Cheryl?
I watched this film for the first time for this podcast, but I felt like I'd seen it before, because I had. Well, kind of. I saw the MST3K version of Invasion of the Eye Creatures, which is this movie remade. That movie received a lot of ridicule by the MST3K crew, and deservedly so, I thought. So I was pleasantly surprised when I watched the original. It's comedic without resorting to slapstick. It's a little scary. I mean, a man did die, but it's not terrifying. And though none of the characters here are terribly deep, I have nothing bad to say about the acting. In fact, it looks like the cast were all having a fun time making this film. I also felt that sense of fun and even whimsy was present in all the production elements, from the over-the-top alien designs to the effective use of nighttime as a cover for those same aliens' movements, to the score, which kept the plot moving briskly without being so intrusive that it demands your attention. This movie is a light but tasty confection that I found immensely enjoyable. As a matter of fact, I'm struggling to find something to not like about the film. I guess, well, I think Johnny and Joan were too young to get married. It seems like they were doing it just so they could make out without having to sneak away from their parents, whom they were still living with and still would be after they got married. Oh, and that brings me to another quibble. What pair of teenagers ever necked for hours without getting past first base? Even in the 50s, I think that would be hard to believe. I suppose the fight between the heifer and the alien was probably a little goofy, but I think it was forgivably goofy. It's an absurd touch, but I love the absurd. This scene seems like it would have fit right in as part of a Monty Python's Flying Circus episode, and coming from me, that's high praise. But I do wonder if this worked as a companion piece to I Was a Teenage Werewolf. I have to wonder what the teens who watched both features felt seeing these movies back to back. Was the lighthearted comedy of Saucermen a salve after the tragic melodrama of Teenage Werewolf? Or were the two movies just so dissonant that they left audiences bewildered at the combination? The only metric we have to go on, though, is the box office returns for both films. And it says they were record-breaking, so that must mean they worked well together. So I guess even though I don't have a lot to say about this movie, I do want to just, reiterate how much I enjoyed it. It was silly, it was fun, and I'm giving it an A for awesome, too. And that's going to wrap up this episode of the American International Podcast. I'm Cheryl Lightfoot.
And I'm Jeff Markin.
And we'll meet you at the drive-in.
Follow the American International Podcast on Instagram and Letterboxd at AIP_pod and on Facebook at facebook.com/American International Podcast.
The American International Podcast is produced and edited by Jeff Markin.
A man whose mind is distorted by hatred.
And Cheryl Lightfoot.
A girl hungry for too many things.
The American International Podcast is part of the Pop Culture Entertainment Network.